It's time for the unofficial 40. Soonerscoop.com's very official recruiting podcast featuring Soonerscoop.com recruiting publisher Josh McCuistion. Get your recruiting fix from the leader in Sooner recruiting. It's the unofficial 40 with your hosts, Soonerscoop.com publishers Gary Murdoch and Josh McCuistion.
All right, we are back. It is time for another unofficial 40. It seems like it's been a while, and Eddie Radosevich and myself, we're alive. We're back. Eddie wearing his Chicago Cubs hat proudly as his boys move on to the NLCS to face... Who won?
We don't
last
know.
night?
The winner. They play tonight.
Oh, they play tonight. Okay.
We don't know yet.
Either the Nationals or the Dodgers. Eddie wants the Nationals. He doesn't.
I don't care who they play.
No, you told me last night driving back that
I said it doesn't matter.
Dodgers. No, you were concerned.
No, I just said that they didn't play very well against them this year.
That seems like the same thing as saying I'm concerned.
It doesn't matter. I'm gonna kick whoever's ass they play.
All right, Eddie bringing the fire early. Joe Duvall is in studio, happy that he did not have to go to Nashville, I'm sure now, even though I think he really wanted to in the beginning.
Well, I mean, I hate traveling. I like to be at the destination, but like the way there is never
I like
fun.
the driving. By the way, we did see Joe Duvall's mini-me walk into the hipsteriest taco joint that we've... And guess who recommended the hipster taco joint? Josh McCuistion is driving furiously towards Oklahoma right now. Josh, you want to guess who recommended the hipster taco joint?
I think it's the very same non-mini-me Joe Duvall.
How were the tacos, though?
They were great.
They were okay.
I thought they were really good.
They were decent. I mean, there was one that was okay.
I thought
You're
was
just anti-hipster.
It was some of the better tacos I've had.
Everyone should be anti-hipster. Folk music is dying. I hate to tell you this, Joe.
I got my Mumford album on the record player right now.
Is it the new one, though, where they went electronic because they knew hipster was dying?
It is the new one, yeah.
Yeah, see? Right there. All right, Josh McCuistion joining us. Josh, tell us what the hell you're doing right now.
I am currently stuck in traffic about 45 minutes north of Dallas as I head up to Tulsa tonight to see Levi Draper and Isaiah Thomas go head-to-head.
Is it by Sanger where you're stuck?
What's that?
Is it by Sanger where you're stuck?
Yeah, I'm almost dead between Dallas and
the state line.
Denison, basically, is the way to think of it.
Yeah, I think you're stuck. There's something that happens in Sanger. It's like some weird thing. It's not even the state line. We got stuck in it coming back from. It's because they have a little bitty lane change there, and people freak out and start getting off the road on the highway, and it just causes a great big mess. So.
Well, now you're talking about 35. I'm on 75 headed. I'm dodging the whole 35.
Oh, okay. Well, then I don't know what I'm talking about. I do know that there's a lot of traffic cones on I-40 when you head east out of Oklahoma. I think I was talking last night to Eddie, like, how does Oklahoma have these many traffic cones? There were literally like 10 miles of traffic cones.
It's amazing. You go all the way through
you mean
Tennessee.
Like in the entire state's coffers, they have that many cones?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really messed up, actually, because we went through Tennessee and Arkansas. There's no construction anywhere. You hit the state line in Oklahoma, and all you have is construction cones.
We did almost die last night.
Yeah.
I mean, it was some of the heaviest rain I've ever seen. And we had like the truck from that, what was that movie, the AC/DC Overdrive? That had the goblin on the front of it. You guys don't. You're too young.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea what's
happening. I felt like that was chasing me down last night in the rainstorm.
It was raining really hard.
It was scary, and there were jackasses.
There was a point where it was like I can't see anything,
and that was the point when I should have stopped going 60. I never got under 60, which was my own damn fault.
We were making good time.
I couldn't see a damn thing, and yet I decided, this is fine. It's like that guy. It's like that dog sitting in the burning room. This is fine.
Everything's fine. I mean, as long as you point it straight and everybody else keeps going 60, you're good.
Yeah, so that truck riding up my ass was really bothering me, though. So anyway, why did we go to Nashville? Josh, do you want to answer that question? I think, Josh, you and Joe were the ones that heard. Let's just talk about how this broke. Like Tuesday morning, I get back from my radio show, and I usually get back here around 10. I think I stayed around to just glad hand a little bit because during the season I just run out of there as soon as the show is over. So I go to the boss man's office and just chew the fat a little bit before I leave. So I got around 10:15 or so. All of a sudden, Josh and Joe are both blowing up our text exchange. What happened, Josh?
Well, we want to give some credit to Woody Womack, our regional guy with Rivals, who had really helped me on this story all along. But he had mentioned in a post, and he put it up on the corner, that Jacob was planning to talk to Nick Saban on Monday night, and then he would kind of have a idea, because we all know there was a little bit of debate on whether he was a take for Alabama. They have so many inside linebackers that was going to be an issue. So that kind of came about. We heard Tuesday morning that phone call didn't happen, and I thought it was pretty telling when you guys talked to Jacob Phillips. He mentioned Tuesday morning, I knew Oklahoma was right. And I think that was if there was any indecision left in the game for him, I think that was what kind of sealed OU as his decision.
Yeah, and I've been talking to Jacob, since I went out to see him in Nashville this summer. And back then, he kind of gave me the impression that, I think I got a couple of schools up at the top that I like. I'm going to do my visits and everything, but I think there's a couple, and OU's one of those teams. And then kind of throughout the process, we felt confident that Oklahoma was one of those top couple teams, probably with Alabama. And then it looked like Oklahoma was starting to separate here late, and that they looked like they were in good position. And so I texted Jacob, I don't know, a week ago, and I asked him, I said, so what are you thinking? You've done your visits. Do you feel good about where you're going to go? And he said, absolutely not. I have no idea where I'm going to go. He seemed more confused than ever. And that's kind of my first instinct of, maybe something's kind of falling apart here with OU. Josh heard Alabama was starting to make a bit of a move.
What was it like a week ago where Josh, I think you were the first to send out something to our group. It's our group tweet. It's not a group text, but
group DM.
Yeah, group DM, sorry. But you basically called it for Alabama at one point last week, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded, and again, it was me talking to Woody and talking to some of my people. It definitely felt like maybe Alabama had kind of nudged ahead after his official visit there a few weeks ago. And then the weird part to me was the curveball, this A&M visit last weekend that was never part of the plan. He never really mentioned A&M. But I know his trainer in the Nashville area, a guy he worked with a lot, played for Chavis at Tennessee. So there was some connection. There was some worry that maybe that was going to come together. So things over the last week, like after months and months of everybody feeling like, well, if it's not OU, it's Alabama, and then it kind of seemed like it turned to OU, like Joe mentioned, and then all of a sudden it really felt like maybe OU was even in third. It changed very violently over the last few days.
Yeah, and I Jacob's always somebody who he's been a little coy about where he wants to go. He'll kind of lead you down the path of what he kind of likes, but he won't take you all the way there. But, I mean, within these last week or so, this is the first time I talked to him, and he just felt completely confused. And I think the Texas A&M visit, I think Alabama, both those schools really made an impression on him, and he was starting to kind of think, I don't know if I'm going to go to Oklahoma. He was entertaining other ideas. And then I think Josh is exactly right about the Woody report about the Nick Saban call. I think that was the final straw. I think Tuesday he woke up knowing what he was going to do. And, I think we talked to him that Tuesday. I texted with him and said, hey, is it going to be worth it for us to come cover you? And he said, yeah, I think so. So
and I never really talked to this. I don't think anybody really knows yet. I think it'll start to kind of trickle out and about what had happened with Alabama, because I thought it was strange, Eddie. I asked him about Alabama, the towel, and it was like he really didn't want to talk about that.
Yeah, it wasn't a place that he wanted to go.
And I asked his dad about it, and he really didn't want to talk about it. And I don't know. I mean, what do you think that means, Josh?
I think that means exactly what you think it means. I think Alabama, it's not so much that people are going to say, oh, he would have chosen Alabama. I don't know that. I think any kid wants to have that option available to themselves. I don't mean just Alabama, just every option they can have, they want to have. And I think at the end of the day, Alabama probably wasn't an option for Jacob. I think that was what ended up transpiring. I think he figured it out. And we've talked about it for a while, but, it's something, guys, and we talked about it last week on the podcast with all these uncommittable offers. Until the rubber meets the road, the kid doesn't have to know. The coaches don't have to clarify that, and it sounds like Alabama never bothered to clarify it anyway. They just kind of like we said, that they just kind of walked away from him.
Yeah, that's one of the big shady things about these uncommittable offers is they don't tell these kids they're uncommittable offers. What they do is they offer them, giving the kid the full expectation that the kid can commit. I'm sure they did at the time when they offered Jacob, but when they get to the point of no return where they can't take any more kids at that position or whatever, they don't tell the player very often. They just kind of stop communicating, kind of let that go naturally. And it's not, I mean, it's BS for the kid, let's be honest.
It's mind-blowing to me that Alabama can just walk away from a kid
That's
like
true.
Jacob Phillips. Mind-blowing.
Yeah. It really is. It kind of shows just where Alabama is right now in their recruiting and just program.
I mean, he's the equivalent of a first-round draft pick in the NFL for colleges. He really is. It's like if the NFL said, we got these 2 picks, but we really don't need that other one. Let's just get rid of it.
OU is already having a great year, and Phillips is now their highest-ranked commit. I mean, it's unbelievable that Alabama can say, 37th player in the country. I think we're full.
Well, we talked about that a few weeks ago, guys. I mean, they literally have 5 five-star inside linebackers on their roster. Like, that tells, I mean, this is the highest-ranked OU guy at inside linebacker OU's landed, and I mean, we're going back previous to Curtis Lofton. I mean, we're going back a long way, and I think Zach Latimer would be the guy, actually.
No, he was a top 100 guy, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going back miles, and for him to be that guy, and Alabama's situation is so good at that position that they don't even need him. I mean, he's the best commit, the number 3 class in the country, and Alabama very likely passed on him.
It's a lot like, I'm guessing, how programs that were pursuing Kennedy Brooks felt after he commits to Oklahoma, and you see a bunch of Oklahoma fans saying, he's not even in the 250, he's barely a 4-star, and there's probably a bunch of programs like Arkansas that offered Brooks, and they're thinking, are you kidding me? I'd love to have that kid. So it's just kind of about scale and perspective there.
It's a little bit of luck, but it's a lot of work that ends up landing Oklahoma Jacob Phillips.
Oh,
It's a huge day for the one and only Tim Kish. I mean, Tim Kish. Didn't we say that we should allow him to come on this podcast and give everybody double guns up? However he wanted to do it.
Yep.
If he signed Jacob
Open
Phillips.
invitation, Tim.
So yeah, Tim, you want to come on anytime? You're welcome to just tell all the people on the Crimson Corner that rip you, suck it.
Yeah, we'll get rid of the language restrictions. You can go full cussing.
He could go full cusser.
Yeah.
I am totally down with that.
Suck on it, Trebek.
He can tell him whatever he wants. So I did talk to, and look, here's how I'm going to start. We're going to start out by giving Tim Kish full credit. And I talked to Coach Waite at East Nashville. I talked to his father, and people say, why do you guys drive 20 hours to go talk to a kid for 30 minutes? Well, first off, because we can. Because we are that powerful. Because we can do it. We're not bloggers that, have to get our, the day off of our job. We do this.
This is our job.
Russell Westbrook, we do this. So we did it. But I'll tell you, the benefit.
It was worth it.
The benefit, it was worth it. And I told you this coming back, like, if we drove 20 hours to do something, like, I feel like we got our 20 hours of drive time with. We got to talk to the kid. We got to see, him make his announcement. We got to meet his family. I got to talk to his coach, got to talk to his dad. Everybody's in a great mood, so there's never a better time to interview people. And I'm going to write a whole write-up on this deal. But, we are able to get a perspective from this that nobody else has. And, for instance, talking to his dad, like when Jacob Phillips calls us and says it might be worth your while to come down. That had to been, what time was that on Monday night?
I didn't.
Was it late when you guys first heard this?
I didn't find out till Tuesday.
Yeah, it was
Tuesday
Tuesday
morning.
morning, I think.
Yeah, Tuesday's
Okay.
when I found out.
So I asked his dad, like, when did you guys, how did this kind of come about? When did you know that this was going to be the decision? And here's Derek Phillips, Jacob Phillips' father.
To be honest, we didn't know what he was going to do until the 11th hour.
Really?
I've been asking him for 8 months, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
He's like, well, let me take my officials and then I'll decide. And even up to last week, we didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, let me throw this. I mean, like, okay, I'm sitting around. We went to OU's practice last night. I'm talking to Baker Mayfield, and Josh is calling me, and our other guys are calling me. They're saying, hey, Jacob says if we come down there, it might not be a waste of our time. And so we're like, okay, well, we got to go down there. So we got in the car, drove 10 hours, and we're like, This kid better pick Oklahoma. I mean, was it kind of around yesterday when it all really solidified for him?
Well, I think more like 11 or 12 last night. We were up. He had taken Monday off from school because he was still at odds with a few schools, and he really didn't know.
Yeah.
And he prayed about it, and the thing about Jacob, he's gotten a lot of his prayers answered, and all I can say is he prayed to God about it, and God put it on his heart to pick Oklahoma. So, and I went with that.
Yeah.
I went with that. You can't go against God.
Yeah.
Not as a man who believes.
Yeah.
So it I guess about 11, 12 last night is when it finally came to him to make that decision.
So you think about all the stuff that this kid's gone through, and we were talking about before we got on the air. I always see like Anthony Hines tweeting on Twitter, and I'm just like, this has got to be in the modern history of recruiting. Like Anthony Hines has to be the guy that has done the recruiting game more than anyone else in the history of the world. Like he's been visiting schools since he was a sophomore, like going on massive tours across. Like he's been. How many times has he been to every school in the Big 12? Has he been to every school in the Big 12? I mean, in the South part, at least twice, Josh?
I would say that's probably right. I mean, I know he's been to Texas numerous times. He's been to OU probably at least half a dozen times. I mean, you go down the list. He's seen, and that's what we talk about. I mean, he's been around. He knows the lay of the land.
And you think to yourself, like, how does he not know? And that kind of, it's kind of the way with Jacob. I mean, it's like he's been recruited since he was a sophomore by Oklahoma, but it really came down to one day of really taking off of school and sitting down and thinking about it and then picking Oklahoma. It's at some point in this process, you just have to make a decision.
Yeah, that's a great look into their mind because they're just enjoying the ride, I guess, for the most part, just taking it all in. And they're it's almost like procrastinating. It's something you do with a paper. I'm going to make that decision down the road.
It's all fun and games until you realize, okay, I'm going to announce this publicly.
Exactly. The night before the papers due, you got to write it all at once. He's got to figure out all of these things the night before. And, I think Anthony Hines is just like the kid that stayed at the party too long. Everybody else is kind of like, oh, we had our fun. We're leaving. And he's like, no, I'm hanging out, man. Here by myself. Give me another beer. That's what Anthony Hines is doing.
I'm just glad Joe didn't use a relationship analogy.
Oh, I'm moving on.
Those people usually get arrested, too, by the way.
They do, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, essentially, the night before, 11 or 12 o'clock, I'm sure after all the Alabama stuff shakes out, he realizes it's Oklahoma. That's where I want to be. And we talked to his coach as well, just about what it was that OU did that ultimately won Jacob Phillips.
How do you think Oklahoma sold him?
I think Oklahoma sold him by outstanding recruiting. I think Coach Kish did a great job with Jacob.
Yeah.
And you would have to ask his family a little bit more so than myself.
Yeah.
But I think being there on him the whole time, they did their due diligence.
Yeah.
Suck on it, Trebek.
There you go, Tim Kish. That one's for you. But, I mean, Josh, ultimately, when he left on his official visit, I know you were talking a lot about things are looking really good. You would be surprised maybe if a commitment didn't happen. And it's almost like he went through this little month kind of flirting around, and he came back to where he was after his OU visit.
Yeah, it's a lot like, I was talking on the board today. We wrote that story kind of what's next for Oklahoma now that Phillips has committed. We're looking at what's still there. And somebody asked me, Josh, what if OU loses 4 scholarships? And do they have 4 that open up? I said, well, yeah, but we're projecting that. You're working toward that. That's what it's like when you're trying to decide these, like people ask you, where do you think Jacob Phillips is going to go? Or what do you think Marvin Wilson's going to do? It's not that Jacob Phillips knew what he was going to do 6 months ago. I don't believe that. But at the same time, when I look at it and the things that make sense, he's got the best relationship with Tim Kish. He said that repeatedly. You go down the list and you kind of look at all the things that that were important to him. And that's something I always ask kids. When you look at it, one of those 2 or 3 things are going to be really important to you when it comes time to decide. and you talk, and they'll usually give you a very honest response. Well, start looking at it. Does that add up for OU? Does that add up for Tennessee or Alabama or whoever they're looking at? And then you can start to get a picture. Now, obviously, that's not always going to be right because, sometimes the things that in your head or scientifically make sense, they don't add up when it comes to recruiting because, sometimes it's just a pure emotional gut reaction and you can't project those kind of things. But, yeah, that's what this is you're not always saying, yeah, Jacob Phillips told me he's going to Oklahoma. It's just saying this is what makes the most sense. And if I had to pick today, that's what I would expect.
By the way, here's some more suck it from Tim Kish.
Tell me about I know we've talked about it a lot, but Coach Kish, Coach Stoops, Coach Bob Stoops, what they meant throughout this recruitment.
It meant a whole lot. Having a relationship as close as I do with Coach Kish and Coach Stoops, that's kind of the X factor in most of the decision I made. But getting to tell them that I'm going to be Oklahoma student yesterday, it just really brought a big smile on my face.
How final is this decision for you?
Oh, yeah, it's 100% final.
Suck on it, Trebek.
So, ultimately, I've heard this said before, recruiting is all about relationships, and OU developed the best relationship with the kid.
When I was out there for the summer, and I was talking to the assistant coaches, and I said, all right, what coaches have kind of come through here? One of the assistant coaches immediately said Tim Kish, and I've told this story on the board lots of times, but that Tim Kish came not only to practice, not only shook the hand and met every coach, but he went to every single player on that team and shook their hand and introduced himself, and that's something that kind of resonated with the coaches. And I said, all right, well, who's come up here from Alabama? And they said, Lane Kiffin. Didn't expand.
Wow, Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, didn't expand on it. He didn't say anything bad about Lane Kiffin. Just kind of said that, and you got the impression that it was the type of atmosphere and group that responded more to a guy like Tim Kish, who was just going to come in and be a nice guy, come introduce himself to everybody, over someone like Lane Kiffin, who might just show up bringing the Alabama brand, the Lane Kiffin brand, and thinking that's going to impress people.
Lane Kiffin probably had a girlfriend in Nashville he wanted to go see.
Wow.
I say that with a lot of respect to Lane Kiffin, too, because
Opinions expressed by Eddie Radosevich are not those of Soonerscoop.com. Direct all lawyer inquiries to CubsFanEd at yahoo.com.
I applaud him for that, too.
Moving on. Jacob Phillips. It was really interesting being there, Eddie, because you got to see, other players from other schools were coming to his announcement. Mm-hmm. And we've kind of talking to Woody Womack. We kind of got the lay of the land a little bit about, because we all know this is, and Josh, we see this kind of happening in Dallas a little bit when you have, I don't want to call them hangers on, and I don't want to call them street agents, but you have a collective that's developing of a group of players and their trainers. And JD does that, but I wouldn't necessarily call it what he's doing anything nefarious or,
Yeah.
He's just training a bunch of kids. They all kind of are in his group. They become this kind of team almost. And that goes on in Atlanta too. And it's like Jacob Phillips is kind of part of that. And we see it all happen. And you have all these teams now coming in, just like I've seen it happen with JD. Like it's more on the Wyoming and teams come in and they kind of see that this is something that's going on in this area. This is if there's one kid here, there's probably another kid here. And if you offer this kid and you offer these other kids, it looks good. And so I think people are figuring that out about SEC areas as well. I mean, am I making any sense? Can you expand on that any?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense because it's just something where, especially when you get kids that are coming from far away. You mentioned Wyoming with Oklahoma. Well, they had 5 guys recruiting in the state of Oklahoma over the last week because they've got guys like Chandler Garrett, and you go down that list.
And Memphis, you can include Memphis now because they've really
exactly. That's another great one because when a kid goes there, they're like, well, that's Memphis. That's a long way from home. I don't know. But if you've got 7 guys that you either trained with or at least kind of knew, friend of a friend sort of thing, that makes that transition easier. You can take Memphis more seriously. And that goes to Oklahoma or anywhere else. I mean, if you build those kind of relationships, it's not coincidental that Oklahoma keeps recruiting well in Fresno. That's not an accident. That's those guys know people. There's relationships. It's a comfort level.
Is it Coach Perry, the DB coach out there? That's kind of that guy.
Yeah, Tony Perry. Yeah, And you get that, and then to be honest, like you go back even probably a better example of what you're talking about is San Diego with the Brennan Clay and Kenny Stills and Tony Jefferson deal. They got Brennan Clay, and that helped them reel in Tony Jefferson and Kenny Stills. And Oklahoma, then went on to get like Taylor McNamara. I mean, they've done well in San Diego. Yeah, I mean, you look down that list, and that they really, over the last few years, you haven't seen the same impact in that area. But it's not coincidence because these guys know each other, and it's easier to go somewhere when you're not on an island. You're not the only guy. You have some familiarity, and you get to know each other.
And, I think those guys that do that stuff, they know, like, the tale of who is it, Will Lyles? Was that the guy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Baron Flannery. I mean, those were the guys, like, and see, like, it's really funny because we were talking to Woody about Oregon's kind of hesitant about getting involved with this stuff. And it goes back to because they got involved with the wrong people. They got involved with Will Lyles. And so I'm sure their compliance department, their athletic department is like, this was really embarrassing for us, what happened with Will Lyles. Like, we don't want to be involved in this stuff anymore. And even though there may not be things going on that's bad or against NCAA rules or money changing hands and stuff like that, it's like we kind of heard the tale from Woody about how Oregon's really being hurt because they're not getting involved in talking to these trainers and these kids and making multiple offers and stuff like that. So all that being said, this is quite a minefield for people to kind of wade through these days. And getting kids out of the SEC country has become a little bit harder, but just like Memphis and Wyoming and all these schools, if you play the game, not saying you're playing a dirty game, but if you learn how to maneuver yourself through these worlds, then you can have success. And I'm not really saying Oklahoma's playing the game, but to be able to go in and get Jacob Phillips that's involved in all this stuff that has so many connections, that has so many ties, that's really, to me, a big win for them. And it shows that they can go in and keep doing this in the SEC.
Yeah, even on his own team, there's a sophomore, Jayshon Watkins, who already has multiple SEC offers. And, that's somebody that Oklahoma, if they offered, he'll listen now.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have listened before, probably, but now that Phillips is on the team, you got somebody that you have their ear. I think I counted there's 9 different states Oklahoma has players from in this one class alone. I mean, think about how different that is when you go down the list of Texas's roster. I mean, there might be a handful of guys not from Texas on that roster. And it's something I've talked about with Ahmad Thomas and Will Johnson before, about national guys on this team. And Will Johnson even said he's from Baltimore. He loves talking to all the guys on the team, figuring out where they're from, what's the culture like there, how they all kind of blend together. It's a different kind of atmosphere at Oklahoma than it is at some other schools.
And you know what, Josh, going way back when, like you look at what Cale Gundy and Kevin Sumlin were kind of doing in the Atlanta area when they brought in Duke Robinson, in those guys, they kind of were starting to build towards that. And then Kevin Sumlin left, and they kind of just stopped for a while. It seemed like it's almost like Cale didn't have a partner to go in there with anymore, and it just kind of fell apart for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought Joe touched on a good one too. OU goes in and gets Charles Tapper, a guy that probably didn't get his attention he deserved in Baltimore. A few years later, they got Will Johnson. I mean, like there are these things, and you look at the connection. Those guys worked with the same trainer. The same guy,
yeah.
Corey Jones out of there. Not Jones isn't right. Corey doesn't matter. But that's kind of what you're talking about. Is you get these guys and you build these relationships. And Joe, that's a great point where he talks about
Way to go, Joe.
Jacob Phillips' teammate that would never he'd have gotten the OU offer and then be like, but there's no reference for it. There's no, this is important because, well, now it's important because Jacob plays there. He's got that relationship, and I can call Jacob and see what he thinks about it out there and talk to him. I think if you put true serum in Jacob, when he got his offer 2 years ago, it was probably the same thing. He was not thinking, oh, man, I may go to Oklahoma. I guarantee that's just good recruiting by Oklahoma. They've worked hard, and now maybe, I don't want to say you don't have to work as hard, but you already have an in. You have a built-in relationship. You don't have to cultivate that. That kid has seen Tim Kish. He knows him, and then he can bring, whoever the position coach is to go and build, to continue to build that relationship.
I feel like we're giving a master class in recruiting right now. It's like everybody's out there, SEC, everybody says that. No, it really is about so much more. I mean, it is there's these little inner workings, and it's why it's difficult for people in recruiting to to really figure some of this stuff out, and why staff's kind of... That's why you need support staff anymore. That's why you need guys that can help you kind of traverse this stuff and let you know. It's just like social media. It's like coaches were so lost when it came to social media. They had to have people come in and help them run their accounts and stuff. You need people to help you run recruiting now and the ever-changing landscape of it, and how kids are not just interacting on social media, but how they're interacting, because it's not just your high school coach. And I know coaches hate this stuff, but let's face it, it's one of those things they railed against. Like they railed against 7-on-7 when it first started blowing up, because they didn't understand it. They didn't have the time to understand it. Now you really do need these staffs in place to kind of help you figure out what kids are into. It's just like with building these new facilities for Oklahoma. I think they made some mistakes in not including certain things like you see Clemson doing with their facilities right now. It's just it's a ever-changing, ever-evolving world, and it can make your head spin if you don't keep on top of it.
And if you're not winning.
Yeah.
You're just not winning.
And you're not getting the recruits you need to get to win.
And you're probably not coaching anymore, honestly.
How do you mean? Like you're just so lazy, you're not doing anything?
Or you've been fired, or teams have moved on from you, and I mean you have to adapt in this day and age.
Adapt or die.
This is really nerdy. All of a sudden, recruiting has turned into like nerdy analytics, but socially.
We can do it for one segment, for one half of a podcast.
This is what happens when you send Kerry out on the road. He learns too much.
Your mind has been broadened.
I try to shield you from all this, Kerry. I really do.
Just give me the SE fans, the mouth breathers, just screaming SEC, and that's why everybody gets recruits.
That's why. God, is there? Speaking of, to kind of get it back to a more, I guess, something that fans can grab onto. There is one Big 12 team other than Oklahoma in the top 30 in the rankings. I think it was Eddie that shot this stat out the other day. Can Kerry or Joe? Can you tell me who that other team is?
Another team.
And this has been brought up so much. I can't believe.
Big 12 teams in the top 30 in the Rivals team ranking.
This has been brought up so much. I can't believe I haven't
cheated
looked it up
and
yet.
looked, and it's amazing.
Is it
West Virginia?
I'm going to say Kansas, just because that seems so improbable.
No.
Texas Tech.
Almost. Iowa State.
Holy cow.
Yeah, because they've got a brand new young staff in there.
It's because they got a Norman North product. Charlie Kolar committed. That's why.
19 commits for Iowa State right now. They're ranked 28th in the Rivals.com rankings.
What is Texas right now?
Texas, I can give you the ones going back. Oklahoma State's 33. West Virginia's 42. Oh God, Texas. I keep scrolling down. Texas Tech is 55. And there's the Longhorns. 8 commits right now in the 2017 class, and ranked number 60, smack dab in between Wake Forest and East Carolina. Texas San Antonio has edged them. They're number 57 right now. Them and Army.
Jeez.
This is a huge problem. I mean, I'm not. This isn't a joke-worthy
Texas
problem.
fans would
It's a
tell you
huge
though.
problem.
Texas fans would tell you though that Charlie closes strong.
They would use a pun when they tell you things.
Yeah. And they're going to get guys at the end, but my God, I did not realize that it's that bad.
How different is that from the years when their junior day they'd basically wrap up their entire class? I mean, that wasn't too long ago, was it? It was 7 years ago they were doing stuff like that.
That's really bad for this conference.
Kansas right now is 70th. That's 10 spots below Texas.
It's okay when, it was okay when TCU was like in the 80s and Kansas State was in the 80s. Because you knew that they were well coached.
That's how they survived.
Yeah, and they were going to find some diamonds in the rough. That was how they ran their programs. But when every team is in the 50s, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. Is it more surprising that Texas is currently 60th in the country in recruiting, or that 16 of Oklahoma's 22 commits are 4 stars?
Here's something I'd like to figure out, Josh. Like, how many Texas down linemen are in the Rivals 250? I don't know if that's we should probably have a better database than we have, where we could just look that up really fast. I've just given Joe like a wet dream right now. He is like scrambling. Oh my God, it's stats. He wants stats. Why did he tell me this before the show started?
I'm on it.
You
Don't
can
worry.
pull that up fairly quickly.
So defensive down lineman or just down lineman?
Defensive down lineman,
Okay.
yeah. I'm just saying, I mean, that to me, that's been pointed out this past couple of weeks about how bad it is in Texas these days.
You got Legarion Carson and Marvin Wilson are kind of the two headliners. They're top 50 guys in the country, obviously.
Caleb Von
I'm just trying to go off the top of my head. Caleb Von Shishon's a 3-star. I mean, he's an outside linebacker. Right. So, I mean, you know, like I would be shocked if it's more than 6.
But I mean, that's the thing watching this conference this year that just struck. And you know what? Oklahoma State, on paper, it looks like they should have one of the best down lines in the country. And they're struggling this year. But name me one school that you look at their defensive line and say, yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, OU, when they're healthy and they've got Charles Walker and Matt Romar, I think OU fans think that, but I don't know what people outside of Oklahoma are like, oh, yeah, I know their defensive linemen. They're really good.
Well, yeah, it's a solid group, but it's not somebody like they're special. You know, that's that, you know, Dvorak and Tommy Harris, like that kind of crew. No, there's nothing like that.
And it's not getting any better. I mean, with this recruiting that we're seeing, it's just getting more and more into basketball on grass.
I don't know how you turn that around either. It just doesn't seem like there's an easy fix for any school right now. And, you know.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that I think is the most pressing part about it is you have to go outside of Texas to improve your situation.
Yeah.
If you're everybody, Oklahoma does. Texas Tech has to. Texas has to. Texas has to. I mean, whoever thought that Texas needed to rely on outside states to get good defensive tackles?
Where's Texas? I mean, I guess they're in on a lot of guys, and it's striking to me that I didn't realize that it was so bad that they were 60th right now. Where are they in on a lot of guys that they're going to end up getting, and it's going to be okay in the state of Texas? Or, like you said, Kerry, are they going to have to end up going outside of the state?
Well, Josh, I don't think Charlie Strong's afraid of going out and saying. In fact, I think he
maybe prefers it.
He prefers it a little bit, just because I think he realizes, unlike Mac did, that, like Mac. Let's face it, Mac's thing was he controlled the borders. He loved, whining and dining the high school coaches. He loved coming in there like his character on Friday Night Lights, where he told everybody what to do and they looked up to him like he was a god. Like. He made his own little fiefdom. Is that the right way of putting it in Texas? And I don't think Charlie Strong looks at it that way.
No. I mean, because you guys remember, even within like months of Charlie Strong being hired, there were Texas Coaches Associations, like board members, the High School Coaches Association, that were very upset that he didn't give them the same amount of time. You know, when Mac would go to their annual convention, he'd spend all day glad-handing and talking to people, and I think Strong came for like an hour, gave some very mundane comments, and then just left. And I think there was a lot of people that felt like, oh, he's not doing what he needs to.
And let's face it, Art Briles played that game with those guys, and they loved him for it.
Oh, well, Art's one of them. I mean, like, they saw him as he was one of the gang. So there was never, and I think that's why.
And that helped Baylor. It did.
No question. But the thing that always sticks out to me, you go back to when Texas won the national championship in 2005, what was the first thing Mac Brown said? I want to thank all the Texas high school coaches out there for trusting us. And, he knew how to play that game with Texas high school coaches, because those guys, you can say Florida high schools are better or California or whatever. There is no state that their high school coaches are more revered than they are in the state of Texas. I mean, those guys are legends if they're really good, and I don't think there's any other state that takes it that seriously.
Okay, you guys ready for the number of defensive linemen from Texas in the Rivals 250?
Yes.
What did you guess, Josh? What did I hear? 6, I think?
I would say a normal over-under for any year would have to be 8.
2.
Wow.
So it's the two that everybody knows.
Marvin Wilson and Legarion Carson. That's what you got.
Wow. That's not good.
I mean, that can't build a conference.
I mean, the state of Oklahoma has one, Isaiah Thomas, Tulsa Memorial. I mean, that's incredible. And I think I talked to Mike Stoops about that once. It's hard to go into Texas to get defensive down linemen, get offensive linemen, get guys that can run the football. And he said that's just the way the game's moving. It's just the way it is. It's basketball and turf. And I think that's a great point you all are making, that Texas is not – you can't live and die in Texas anymore. You just can't do it. It's not the way recruiting works anymore. It's not the style. They play one style of football in Texas, and it doesn't produce enough people to go around the way it used to.
Who is Oklahoma's best young defensive lineman right now, and where is he from?
Neville Gallimore is from Canada.
He's from Canada. He's from frickin' Canada. Not Texas, not California, not Louisiana that produces them. He's from frickin' Canada. That tells you all you need to know right there. Eddie's searching for his hard drive is booting up.
I got nothing.
Just disgusted.
I am disgusted.
You know what, Josh? It does. It makes a lot of sense because when we go to rivals camps now, it really is like almost a barren wasteland when they go to one-on-ones with offensive linemen, defensive linemen. I mean, there's a few matchups you want to see, but mostly it's guys you've never heard of, and you're just sitting there going, I think maybe he could play somewhere.
Yeah. Or it's like, oh, that dude looks pretty crazy.
What hair?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there'll be 5 or 6 guys that you're like, oh, yeah, you write home about that guy, the Austin Deculus kid. But even he, when he went up against Marvin, he faced somebody real, he just got massacred. Like, it wasn't even close. And that's, I've talked about this stuff for years. When you put so much priority on 7-on-7, I can't blame the high school coaches that when they go to Friday nights during the season, they're going to run these crazy pass-happy offenses that have nothing to do with line play.
I mean,
so it just devalues the whole position.
It's happening in Oklahoma, too. I mean, you look at Norman North, who's the number 3 team in 6A1, and they're not doing it with anybody on offense that's going to be a huge D1 guy. I mean, Charlie Kolar coming to Iowa State's probably their best guy. But they're doing it through that spread offense. They're getting it out quickly. And that's what these teams are going to. And I've probably seen Bray Walker out of Southmore 3 or 4 times, and I don't know if I've ever seen a defensive lineman even come close to giving him a challenge. I almost don't know what Bray Walker is yet because there's no defensive lineman that's going to give him a day at the office. I mean, I don't know. I don't see the guys in the trenches that were there before.
Well, it's almost gotten to the point, Josh, where anytime we see a guy that is big, that isn't just fat and has a decent body. I know that sounds weird, but I'm going to say it. Such as a Devontae Lampkin, such as a Chris Daniels. I mean, it's almost like we're just like, oh, yeah, that kid can play. He's got it. And everybody's got to offer those kids, regardless of if they're legitimate, high-caliber players at that position. You just have to offer those kids now.
Oh, you do. I mean, and it's the same for me when I'm going through and I see some sophomore on tape, and it's exactly what you said, Kerry. You'll see him, and you say, okay, he's 6'4" and he's 255.
He's got a nice frame. How about we say that?
Really play, but let's go. We're going to have to add him to the database.
And you take your chances.
Somebody's going to take a flyer.
Yeah, you take your chances and hope that you can coach him up and get him in a strength training program, and like he could develop some of the strength and power that he doesn't have on film right now.
I mean, Oklahoma has a player on their team now, Jordan Wade. When he came into Oklahoma, he came with Marquise Anderson. They were both Rivals 250 defensive linemen out of Texas. They also came with Jordan Phillips, who was defensive lineman out of Kansas.
Tonkawa.
Yeah, we're not that far removed from Oklahoma being able to get big defensive linemen in the area.
But what do you do? I mean, what do you do if you're recruiting Marvin Wilson? Do you give him that list? You say, there's only 2 of you guys in this entire state. These other schools in the Big 12, forget about them. Oklahoma's the only school you have a chance to play with a successful teammate with.
Somehow you put that. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, I do that, and I also, because if you're talking about the Big 12, his only other viable option is Texas.
Right.
And I'm going to look at all these elite guys that Texas has landed that have done nothing. Sure, maybe we haven't had a Gerald McCoy in a decade or whatever, but at the same time, Jordan Phillips is a second-round pick. I mean, we've had some guys that had some production. You've got guy after guy that's gone to Texas. It's even worse on the offensive line. Texas's development of offensive linemen has been just borderline criminal.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, no, you finish because I wanted to pivot to something else before we get out of here.
Yeah, it just that's the way I would pitch that. If you feel like Texas is your primary concern. I'm going to show all these guys, all these elite guys that were supposed to be, maybe not just as good as you are, Marvin, but guys that are on that level have done nothing. And, there are at least a few skins on Oklahoma's wall over the last 5 or 6 years.
Before you present all that to Marvin, it probably should be before you give him the suitcase of money.
Who's the bag man?
I can't tell you.
Okay. Eddie's just like the show derailer today. Okay, before we move on, and we're running out of time here, I wanted to get back to Jacob Phillips just because we spent all that time driving there and back. But, we talk so much about Sooner Squad 17, and it's, Eddie, it was really interesting just kind of watching guys go after Greg Rogers last night on Twitter after. It's like they've done a really good job of trying to build momentum. Like something happens, they build momentum to something else.
Yeah.
This happens, they build. So they used Jacob Phillips yesterday to kind of, I'm talking about the kids themselves, and maybe you have a coach saying, hey, it might be not a bad thing if you guys started going after Greg Rogers after what Jacob said today. But we asked Jacob after the game kind of what his role was going to be moving forward in recruiting now that he has announced he's committed to Oklahoma, and here's Jacob.
You look at what your role is now going forward. I mean, there's still some big targets on the board out there that Oklahoma's chasing. Do you want to be a guy that becomes a recruiter? Are you going to finish every tweet with hashtag Sooner Squad 17 now?
Yes, sir. Definitely. I'm definitely going to embrace all the things about Oklahoma and Sooner Squad 17, and I'm going to try and get the best dudes in there. I know we want Marvin Wilson, and Greg Rogers, so we want him. I want them in front of me, playing in front of me. So
now I asked his coach as well, Coach Waite, kind of how much this class, having a number 3 class in the country, meant coming down the stretch, because we talked about it early in the podcast. It was a gut-wrenching decision for him to come to. It ended up, several factors made Oklahoma the choice, and his coach said, having a top-rated recruiting class, guys he could come in with, definitely played a part in his decision.
Now, we know Alabama is going to have some great, outstanding guys, but he felt like he would make an impact at Oklahoma. He felt like he would be able to come in, produce, and the guys that were coming in were going to be able to do the same thing. So they feel like they're going to be able to accomplish something great and special at Oklahoma with this class.
And I'll say this, we've talked so much about their failings over the last few years in recruiting. But Josh, the support staff that they put together, Drew Hill, Rajiv Hossain, all these guys, Cale Gundy, being the recruiting coordinator, even Bob Stoops heading this thing up. You have to give this staff a lot of credit for, as we talked about, building on the momentum. They've had something to sell. They've sold it a little bit at a time. Ever since this new staff got in here with Cooks and Lincoln Riley and Dennis Simmons, Calvin Thibodeau even now part of it, they've been working their asses off in recruiting, and I predict, I'm not going to lie, I told people calm down 2 years ago before they even went to the college football playoff. When we saw them out at summer camps, these guys are hustlers. They're going to recruit. They're going to get classes that Oklahoma needs, and Josh, it's starting to prove out now.
Yeah, and maybe we're both egomaniacs, because as you were saying that, Kerry, that was the same thought I had. Is we said this a year or so ago, like, I know that maybe the results don't look right yet. It's not, the top 10 class everybody wants as far as OU fans, and obviously the coaches as well. But when you were watching things and you were talking to these kids, you got a different feel. You knew something had changed. The thing that always sticks out to me is for years and years, I would have kids that, that were OU offers, and I knew guys that OU wanted, and they'd say, I haven't heard from them in a couple of weeks. I can't think of the last time I had that conversation. Guys, they don't get dropped. There's nothing like that. There is, whether it's, a crystal clear plan, I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not in the coaching offices every day. Or if it's just guys being diligent about, we're going to stay on this kid. Every guy I talk, all my guys, I'm going to talk to them. I don't know which one it falls under, but regardless, kids are being contacted. They're being made to feel important. And I think OU's dropped that whole mantra of, if they want it, I think Bob used to say it all the time. I don't know what he meant, but I think it became a crutch when he would say, we get the guys we're supposed to get. Well, that becomes self-defeating because, if they go somewhere else, it wasn't because you didn't do your job. They just weren't supposed to come here. And that ends up being just a well, like, oh, he didn't want to come. Well, that's not true. Another school just outworked you. And I think Oklahoma started to face that, and then they're doing better because of it. They're going out and really working guys, and they have a plan B and C to every possible scenario.
It's harsh to say this, but the mantra of we get the guys we're supposed to get means you end up with a bunch of 2 and 3 stars that work really hard but just aren't good enough on the field.
Well, that's where you saw Mac fall off. We talked about Mac earlier and all how great he was in recruiting. Those last 2 or 3 years, like Joe talked about, he would get all his commitments at junior day. Well, that left no room for evaluations. That left no room for a senior that made a big jump. You know, a perfect example is Jeremy Beal. Texas was full, and then Jeremy Beal has a huge senior season at Carrollton Creekview, and Oklahoma had room for him. Texas didn't. Guy goes on to be an All-Big 12 player, and I think was maybe even All-Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year one year. Like, I mean,
he was.
Yeah, so, I mean, that kind of can become crippling when you just keep taking the low-hanging fruit. Like, you're going to have to reach for things, and when fans get upset about guys like Jalen Rager or CeeDee Lamb or whoever taking trips, that's part of the equation, too. You're going to have to work, even when they're committed. Don't treat them like a commitment. You're going to have to keep hunting these guys because that story's not over until they sign.
Well, I think last thing I want to talk about on Phillips is just talking to his coach. And, I mean, certainly we have enough tape to interview him, but it's always good hearing from your head high school coach and exactly what Oklahoma can expect in a guy that he's been coaching for the last 2.5 years. So here's Coach Waite, the high school coach at East Nashville, talking about what Oklahoma's getting in Jacob Phillips.
I mean, just as a player, I mean, obviously Oklahoma's had some good inside linebackers, but they haven't signed a kid of this magnitude in the last several years. What does he bring just that you don't see on a normal basis from inside linebacker?
He's going to bring a ton of energy to this to Oklahoma. He's going to bring energy, enthusiasm, charisma, a leader, a natural-born leader. He's a proficient tackler, but he's so athletic in space, and that's one of the things you don't find often.
Yeah.
That's why he was such a hot commodity for all the institutions that were after him. He has so much length and range. I've seen his athleticism just grow exponentially over the last 2 seasons. So Oklahoma's getting a steal with this guy.
And, it was interesting, Eddie, talking to Jacob after everything broke down because you're kind of shooting the bull with him a little bit. But he was basically, it's amazing to me when we follow it on the inside, when we know Oklahoma's deficient in so many areas and they don't have backups here. One of the things that and they do a better job of fighting this than they used to, but every school that comes in, like Oklahoma still has this aura about them. And people were literally trying to sell Jacob Phillips on, well, you don't need to go to Oklahoma. They have a ton of inside linebackers that are just waiting to play. And he actually did enough of the research to know, like, well, no, they don't. They just actually lost a guy in there. And I said, yeah, they put in a 215-pound guy, so they must really have a shed full of inside linebackers.
It made me really feel like I could be a college recruiter because you just feed a bunch of BS, kind of tell them what they want to hear, and then you don't really have to give them facts. You just kind of, well, they have plenty of linebackers. It's Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And when actually it's
sounds
just
like
really not true.
They had one just retire.
It sounds like it was Oregon that was giving him that pitch too.
Yeah, and
reading between the lines.
Well, and that's the reason why I think Mark Helfrich is just an abomination of a college football coach. I mean, to just run a once proud program into the ground like Helfrich has in Eugene is almost criminal.
But here's my question, Josh. Like, what is Oregon doing, relying on kids from the Southeast? Like. Yeah. That's so far out of their comfort zone.
That's something we talked about on the way home yesterday.
I mean, it just seems like Oregon is a mess. Like they've convinced themselves that they can do anything, and that the only way that I know what happens. I mean, they lost to Auburn in the national championship, and every one of their boosters and donors, and maybe even Pat Knight himself, is like, we need to get kids from that area of the country to really win a championship. When you don't, I mean, you can do it with every kid that's on the West Coast. I mean. Chris Peterson is showing that now. I think Washington is just as good as any team in the country, and they're better than 13th, 14th of the SEC right now.
How many kids did Pete Carroll get from SEC country?
Yeah.
They dominated college football for better half of a decade.
I don't know how much you paid attention to that, Josh, or that, but that was kind of brought to light talking to Woody a little bit. But that's just insane to me that Oregon is concerned with getting kids from the Southeast.
Well, I think what part of it is, and, Woody would know better than myself, but I felt like Oregon always did a really good job cherry picking. They would get a couple guys. They took a defensive end out of Arlington a couple years ago from Oklahoma. So they've done a nice job going places. But you're right. There's a difference between like Oklahoma going into California and picking 10 or 12 guys they think they got a shot with, and maybe 7 of them visit. So they kind of narrow that field. But if they go into California and offer 50 guys, and half of those guys are their 1A or 1B options at a position, you're going to be in trouble come January. You just can't live like that. That's not going to be the way Oklahoma's going to recruit because, like you mentioned, you've got Oregon, you've got Washington, you've got USC, Cal, Stanford. I mean, there's a lot of quality options out there. So Oklahoma's got to identify guys that fit them and that there is a reason to think they would choose Oklahoma, not just every elite guy in California we're going to offer. It's the same thing for Oregon. They used to kind of pick guys and they would pick battles that they could win. Go into Tennessee when Tennessee is down. Okay, we can win that battle. Go into, Alabama when Auburn and Alabama are both kind of scuffling along. They could do that. But now you're seeing them go into, Tallahassee proper and try to beat Florida State for a kid. That's never going to happen. Like, why are you wasting your time doing that? And I think that's where you get into the problem is you get so full of, well, we did it a few times, let's go ahead and expand on that, and then you start losing sight of what your plan and what your model was.
All right. The thing I really want to just point out with that last bit of audio was, and just to wrap this up, is, it's amazing for Oklahoma and Oklahoma fans that they're able to get a guy like Jacob Phillips. It's been so much hand-wringing on the message boards, especially, that Tim Kish has finished second so many times on inside linebacker guys. And we were kind of plotting this out as we were driving back yesterday, like all the kids that Oklahoma has gotten, but at linebacker that have been big recruits, but most of those have been outside guys. It's just to have an inside guy that's this highly rated. And look, you can argue, well, Kish needed the rest of the class. He couldn't close it by himself or whatever. Fine. But he did it. And you have to give the guy credit. And if this kid doesn't pan out, it's not really Tim Kish's fault because everybody wanted this guy.
If you still want to bitch about Tim Kish here, I guess after getting Jacob Phillips, there is a 100% chance you complain after OU wins football games.
Well, yeah. But that happens. We know it happens.
I know. I'm just looking at that area of people.
The timing of this commitment couldn't have been better. Just morale-wise. Jordan Evans is already a senior. He's going to leave.
Yeah.
But then Tay Evans retires. And you're looking at a JUCO guy who's filling in there now.
And by the way, we're ignoring the fact that OU started out 1-3 and hasn't lost a single commitment so far.
1-2.
1-2. Sorry, Bob Stoopsed it there.
They're over 500 now.
3-2.
I think we talked.
But it does say, Joe and Josh, you're the best to talk about this. It does, I don't even know if stabilize is the right word, but it seems like they've moved past this now.
Well, it took away the excuse. I feel like if you create an excuse for guys to leave, they might take it. If you start out 1-3, if you get 3 losses, 4 losses, people are going to have an excuse to leave your program. People are going to start calling you saying, hey, are you starting to look around? And then the question starts arising. They've kind of put that question down. And I think we talked about this on an earlier podcast where what can OU get out of this year? A Big 12 championship, does that really excite people? What OU can get out of this year is holding down this recruiting class, which puts you in a position to win a championship a couple years down the road.
And it doesn't appear that Texas is holding down their end of the recruiting fort.
Oklahoma could dominate this conference for a few years if they string together a couple classes like this.
Do we want to talk about Mr. Boyce, or is that taboo?
I'll leave that up to Josh.
We at least have to acknowledge the fact that he took Texas off of his Twitter page.
Out there.
Yeah, that's a public thing.
He put some of it public. Some of it's known, and it's just like what we talked about with Jalen Rager a couple weeks ago when he took all the OU stuff off of his Twitter page. Like that, is it weird that we have to pay that kind of attention? Yeah, but that's the reality of kind of how this recruiting world works.
And it's not just that. I did text Kobe and I said, you took the Texas stuff off your page. That's like a sign you might decommit. And he says, "Oh no, I don't know if I'm going to decommit yet." You know, this is a kid who's.
Did he really say, "I don't know yet"?
I'd have to look up the exact quote, but it was something to that effect.
Like an argument in high fidelity.
Yeah, it was.
Haven't had sex yet.
I love the reference.
I mean, it's. I don't know. It's going to happen. I mean, that's just my opinion, but it's going to happen. He's going to decommit from Texas, and it's just
because
a matter of
things
time.
are not getting rosier in Texas. I mean, no matter what Charlie Strong does the rest of the season, the when Charlie Strong firing debates are going to continue to rage in Austin.
Someone on the board, when I posted this last night, someone on the board said, "Oh, Texas isn't going to lose any sleep over this," and I thought someone had a great response of, "They only have like 3 or 4 commits. They're going to lose sleep over it. They're losing a quarter of their class if Boyce decommits." I mean, this is a sign of trouble for Texas.
You know, I mean, look, I think that's all that needs to be said. I don't know. I mean, I know the family is kind of weird about what's going on right now, probably a little defensive. But the other weird thing I saw, we're talking about, I hate creating the Big 12 as a dumpster fire narrative, but
it's not a narrative. That's not a narrative. This is a conference.
But
of
like,
a
did you
dumpster
see
fire.
like Baylor like put out 2020 offers today? It's like, why would you even bother? Like the entire staff that comes in next, like keep holding on to that hope that you're going to be around after this year.
I guess
like,
the truth don't lie.
It's not gonna. That staff is gonna get blown out. Like if you get an offer from Baylor, just be like, "Hey, that's great. I wonder if the next staff will offer me." Why are you wasting your time?
I mean, you look at even Shane Buechele. Oklahoma looked like he might be the destination for them. They fired Josh Heupel, and they bring in Lincoln Riley. And Lincoln Riley basically, he didn't want Shane Buechele. So
yeah, and the same thing with Cameron Rising. I hate to say that. I hate people are gonna be like, "Don't say that about kids," but there's a good chance that Lincoln Riley's gonna get a head coaching job somewhere, and whoever comes in, if that does happen, they're gonna reevaluate the entire position. They might not like Cameron Rising. They might love him. Who knows?
I'm going to go ahead and say that's categorically impossible.
Yeah, I think they're
to not love Cameron Rising.
Yeah, I don't. Terry, you guys were traveling. I don't think you saw it. I put up a highlight video of him up on the board, and I put it out on Twitter, too. His last game, he had like almost 600 yards of offense. He has a 7-minute highlight from one game, and I'm not kidding you.
I did see a comment about that.
On the tape. Like, it's amazing.
Let's just be clear. I didn't see anything because even though he offered to drive, he never like really made a push. He was just like,
Who are you talking about?
I could drive if you wanted to.
Yeah, I could have.
Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here and watch videos on Twitter and use your data.
There was never any question who was making every mile of that drive.
I can't lie. It's not just Eddie's thing. It's a control freak thing.
That's kind of the thing. You do it, and then you can complain about it afterwards because you did it. That's kind of one of the reasons you do it. I've been there.
I road trip everywhere, and you don't let me drive either.
I don't let anybody else drive. Oh, that's not true. I'll let you drive. I'll take a nap. Never mind.
Joe, this is coming from a man who napped in the back of a van that I was driving. Like at least Eddie stays coherent and talks to me. And
yeah, I got a coffee with you at 12:30 last night.
You put some Carl's Jr. in me, I'm out.
Yeah, but Eddie, look, our history is way too long. You slept all the way from Phoenix to San Antonio one time.
That's different.
And that was through the night.
That was
you waking up.
That was a rough
I will
trip.
Say, Eddie,
I had
you can't
thrown up in your car that week.
So who was it a rough trip for?
Me. I was so hungover.
You threw up in my new car.
I know.
A car I'm still driving.
I know.
That you leave your damn... Like, Eddie... Like, Joe has started doing this thing, like, after the podcast. Like, I bring Joe a water. And I know you think I don't notice this, Joe, but I do. I mentioned one day that, like, my house is turning into the Signs house. Like, M. Night Shyamalan, where the water is just sitting everywhere because the little girl says it goes bad. And so Joe started taking his cups home. And I noticed that, Joe. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yeah, my mother raised me right.
Whereas Eddie leaves all of his 5-hour energy crap and his Red Bulls sitting in my door to where I'm driving down the road.
So they're there
and
when I get in next time.
It's rattling, and since I'm driving and strapped up, I can't reach over and make it unrattle. It drives me insane.
It's so they're there next time.
Did you take your sunflower seeds yesterday?
Yeah,
because there were still some left.
Yeah, there's like
if you
half
had
a
finished
bag.
the bag, you would have left it in the floor.
No, I would have thrown it away.
No, you would. You never have.
I threw away the coffee cup
because there was still coffee in it. You didn't.
No,
want to
there was
spill
no
it.
coffee.
I feel like that's just a guy friend thing. All my guy friends leave crap in my car. I had a friend leave a mucus bottle in my car all through high school. He would just spit in. I didn't know
What was wrong with him?
Lots of things are wrong with him, but I think he's been coughing up mucus since he was 12.
Joe, by the way, is the most sickly person I've ever met.
That's 100%
in recent
true.
memory.
100% true.
Do we want to say anything about K-State before we get out of here?
Game's on Saturday at 11.
That sucks.
And
you will like.
No, it's good. Good news. Good news. Good news.
The comments by a freshman defender do not bode well for K-State.
I like Oklahoma in the points. I'll say that.
Which it's the strangest trash talk ever. The guy trash talked by using someone else's comments. The guy didn't even say it directly to the media. It was said indirectly through another party, and it got the ire of Baker Mayfield. That's all you have to do, though. I mean, I would say that's more legitimate than the university's own television network airing trash talk.
Yeah. At least he's a starter and plays.
No, the guy that said it is a freshman that doesn't play.
But then why were they even interviewing him?
That's a good, because it was K-State, and they don't let people talk to the media.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's weird.
It's not like they have all that content to fill like Sooner Sports TV does. It's you have to throw out Austin Kendall.
The game that nobody pays attention to probably end up being the best game of the year.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the Kansas State, nobody, when they come into Norman, it's just like, yeah, it's Kansas State, and they win. It's the weirdest game.
Except for the last two times they played in Norman.
Yeah, they won. No. I'm saying K-State wins.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying.
But they don't have Trevor Knight to throw a pick six in this game. And it's not Halloween like it was that one year when they lost.
Shaky kicker. Michael Honeycutt cost him the game 2 years ago.
But he wasn't shaky until that game.
I know, but Siebert has
that game
been.
Destroyed him.
Yeah, he has. It really did. I think it even destroyed Bob Stoops' love for Michael Honeycutt. He just completely threw him under the bus on Monday.
I will say this about the K-State game. Watch out for their run game. I know everybody's built up like, OU plays really good run defense. Well, yeah, they do statistically, but they haven't played a lot of teams that actually want to run the ball.
And they're going to be down.
Foreman wore them down at the end of that game.
They're going to be down 2 defensive tackles, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Charles Walker and Matt Dimer are going to be out.
It's still an issue.
While Kansas State will power run you to death, they'll also they'll mix it up. They slip fullbacks out.
Pop passes.
They pop guys out. I mean, you have to be on your game the entire way.
Glenn Gronkowski's still running wide open down the sideline.
Yep, there you go.
They are more diverse. When I do those the under the hoods each year, usually there'll be about 7 formations. Kansas State has 14.
Yeah.
It takes me forever to chronicle what they do because almost every series is a new personnel grouping, and it's so different from one to the next.
And their defensive line's good too. Jordan Willis is a good player, so I mean they'll bring a talented team.
They will come in here after getting their asses handed to them last year, and they will have a game plan put together to slow down the game, which they didn't do a year ago, which shocked me. To watch Bill Snyder not play a up-tempo no huddle team and not make a bigger attempt to slow down the game, that blew me away last year. He will have it ready to go this year. They will limit the possession. This is how they win in Norman. They limit the possessions, and it's almost like somehow he gets his team to focus. When we play there, we have to do this or we get our heads kicked in, and they believe him. So they're going to come in here. They're going to try and limit it to 5 possessions a half for each team, 5 to 6, and keep it close, and then slowly eke out a win in the end. And that's their formula. That's how they won in Norman.
In a way, I think that could be good news for Oklahoma on the defensive line front. And that, talking to Mike Stoops this past week, he was really worried about how many snaps Jordan Wade, Obo Aronco, those types of guys have gotten. And if they are going to slow it down, that should bode well for Oklahoma to limit those snaps. And you just got to get 3 and outs. And then I think that everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah. Yep. The problem is Obo can handle 94 plays because he's just rushing the passer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're Oklahoma, you have better talent. You want to have as many plays as possible. I mean, that's how you stay close. If you're K-State, you just take the air out of the ball.
You think that will change the way Lincoln Riley approaches the game?
No, hell no. which means they could have a lot of 3 and outs.
Which could be interesting. Could be interesting. I don't know.
I think it's going to be a lot to a little.
I don't think it'll be 55-0.
It's a game. It's definitely a game that worries you, but we should know by halftime if K-State's really in this or not.
Like every
really,
other,
you could say the end of the first quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, Oklahoma's better. They're much better than Kansas State, but you don't know what Oklahoma's going to show up Saturday. That's the truth.
All right. Josh, once again, tell everybody what you're up to this weekend.
Well, it's probably my best slate of games so far this year. I've got tonight. I'm actually in state lines now, so we are actually for the first time ever doing this podcast all within the same state. So that's a big news. But no, I'm on my way up I-75 right now, going towards Tulsa to watch OU commitments Isaiah Thomas and Levi Draper go head to head. I mean, and from what I've been told, there is a very good possibility that most of the night Levi Draper will be blocking Isaiah Thomas. So that could be kind of fun to watch. Even though it's not exactly the position Levi's going to play in college, you're getting to see Isaiah Thomas go against a good athlete and kind of see how that goes. And then tomorrow night, I will head back down to Dallas and catch Kennedy Brooks, the new running back commitment from Mansfield, take on Arlington Lamar, Shane Bouchel's alma mater, and OU's 2018 defensive line offer, Bobby. Well, it's Trey Brown, is what everybody calls him, but Bobby Brown's just way more fun all the way around and less confusing.
That's your prerogative.
I'm trying to think of the lyrics right now. I can't. And guys, Eddie, Joe, Norman North, Union this weekend?
Mm-hmm. We'll be there tomorrow.
It's going to be a really interesting game. I'm interested to see what Norman North's all about. Finally
They're
going
about
up
that
against,
life.
yeah, see, literally to see if they're about that life.
Number 2 versus number 3. My T-Wolves.
Joe, I want to hear the upset call. I want to hear it picked.
Okay, well, here's the deal. Norman North's going to
Oh, God, here we
Norman
go.
North's going to win this game. This is their moment. Norman North, the West Side, this
They've
is
been
the
waiting
time.
for
That sounds like the most West Side thing too, to beat a team in the regular season.
Oh,
wow, that's a
it's
shot.
on the way to an undefeated season for the Norman North Timberwolves. I have full faith.
Here's the thing, Joe. If
And my
you're
alma
really
mater.
serious about this, lay down. Let Union kick your ass.
And so the motivation's
Make
there.
them overconfident. Yeah, motivation there, and make them overconfident if you do meet them in the playoffs.
I'll pass that on to Coach Barnes. Actually, that might be the best way to go.
It would be the best way to go.
Actually, Bob might
Just pray for an ass kicking. How about that?
Bob will talk
Don't
to
be
Texas.
upset.
Because we got to get good video. I want to get some good video.
Pray for an ass kicking where Drake Stoops and Isaac Stoops are the stars.
There we go.
Yeah, Patrick Fields for Union will also be there. OU offer 2018.
I wonder if Bob will be there
The
tonight.
OU commit.
Trey Brown, yeah. I'm sure everybody will be there tomorrow night.
Because
Yeah,
Bob can go to this game, and he can see one of his own commitments.
I'll tell you, this has gotten a lot of buzz in this area. This game, it's got a lot of hype.
Really?
Should be
In
should
what
be-
circles? Like at the
big time Norman North
the on
circles.
cue?
North of Robinson.
the old J Pats. You go to the J Pats diner, sit down for a meal. They'll be talking
Out
about
at
it.
Aussies, they can't stop talking about
Oh,
this.
it's the bell of the ball at Aussies. If you're sitting over some biscuits and gravy and pancakes, you're talking about Norman North versus Tulsa Union.
That is a good
What
call.
is the
though.
what would be the hipster hang? I guess Pub W is the hipster hangout for
Dude,
Norman North people.
Pub W is great, but it wasn't there when I was in school. That place has changed 1,000 times.
But so it's what's the old school?
I thought it was like the
know.
what's the music venue over like north
The
of Campus
Deli?
Corner?
The Deli?
No, not farther north.
farther.
The Apollo or
Oh,
something.
the Opolis.
Opolis.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That's more the youngins.
Is it?
That might be the new millennials. I'm more of the old millennial.
I'm a big fan of the Deli.
We
though.
have to go before we
Hey,
all
I
our
have
heads
one
explode.
thing. I have one thing. I
Yes.
just wanted to congratulate Boone Pickens and the 1945 Oklahoma
Oh, yeah.
A&M team for winning a football national
Did
championship.
they and Navy decide to have a rematch?
I just wanted to congratulate them while everybody was fighting a war overseas. They were winning a national championship. So I just wanted to congratulate the 1945 team.
all right.
Could you send out that little legal descriptor again for us, Kerry?
I don't think. I think those guys are too dead to sue us.
Oh.
My grandma and grandma are smiling down in heaven at you, Eddie. They are loving that.
Yeah, and he's pro-military. I like that. I totally back that awful statement.
I love it.
It was a congratulatory statement.
To one side, yes, it was congratulatory. All right, we're going to get out of here before we all go to hell.
I'm already going.
Thanks to Eddie Radosevich, to Joe Duvall in studio. Thanks to Josh for joining us on the road and for not yell talking. Congratulations, Josh. You did not yell talk. You talked on the car phone without yell talking. That's a great accomplishment for you.
Was seriously worried for quite some time. There was one point in the show where I was like, I'm about to get called out. I was pretty convinced that I had gone down that road.
We may have to do a review. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for this edition. Eddie and I are going to go get some sleep, I think, a little bit more. Do you need some more sleep? Did you get some?
Maybe
you didn't
a little
have to wake
bit.
up for radio this morning.
Yeah, I didn't have
like
to do
did.
radio. I got up
I'll
at
go
11.
get some more sleep. And then we'll see you guys next week. We'll try and get it done earlier next week. By the way, go rate the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, whatever. Please go give us 5 stars. I'm not even going to pretend like you would give us anything else. So thank you for that, and for all the people who have rated us so far, and for downloading the show. Go check out Soonerscoop.com. Still a lot of great Jacob Phillips coverage. And we'll see you next time on another edition of the Unofficial 40 here on Soonerscoop.com.